Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Kirsty, and this is our podcast, Love Needs No Words.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Love Needs No Words. Today we have a very exciting guest, Jordan, who's been a special education teacher for more than 10 years and has over 125,000 followers on Instagram. It's pretty cool. She showcases hints and tips through her video clips on how best to communicate with a child with additional needs, focusing in on sensory ideas and the resources available. Jordan, welcome.
Hi, I'm so pleased to be here. It's so good to meet you. I guess a good place to start for those of you that haven't seen your amazing videos, which I guess probably the minority, given how many followers you've got. Do you want to just give us an overview on what you do on Instagram and what you and in your job and what you're sort of hoping to achieve by showcasing everything?
Yeah, special needs classrooms are so hidden and tucked away. Nobody really knows what happens inside them. Some people have some really warped ideas of that they're like institutions, and other people think it might be like nursery school, and then they're really infantilizing, or they just don't know at all, like, what would we even teach these children? How do we teach these children? Like, what happens? And I think that includes parents of these autistic children as well. Like, what happens in this school? I know my kid likes it, but what does it actually look like? I think is it something that nobody sees, because very few teachers are allowed to share inside their classrooms. So with permission from my school, and with permission of not sharing to the children and not sharing actual lessons, but sharing my philosophies and sharing what happens actually inside the classroom and giving it a go, very quickly, my head teacher could see the benefits of it. One, for my staff team, for the rest of the school, but also worldwide as well. Very quickly, it happened actually. And I think because it's so hidden, I think people just don't see it. Yeah. And then I think my love for the children and the job comes through, and I think it's for very stressed teachers, because let's face it, all teachers are SEN teachers, whether they've chosen it or not. But so many teachers have so little training and understanding of what that actually means. Even if they absolutely adore the kids and want to do the best for them, they have no idea where to turn. And there are such long waiting lists for any support at all. Mm-hmm. And if they do, then sometimes it's outdated support or not neuroaffirming. So I think me just being out there, available in your pocket at all times, for just that reassurance, a bit of hope, a bit of positivity, and then some education as well. I think that's why it's kind of stable, because it's just not out there. Yeah. So it's a big responsibility on my shoulders, I have to say.
You're doing a great job.
I was wanting more people to kind of come on the bandwagon. There is some amazing teachers on social media that are doing the same thing. And I feel like as a team, we can kind of share the reality of it, because I personally, I think it's the best job in the world. I think most days I actually shouted whilst I was on a pedalo eating lunch the other day, I've got the best job in the world. On a pedalo eating my lunch, just thinking, how is this my job? Like, how have I got so lucky?
I think what your videos provide is help to a lot of people. And I've talked on the podcast before about one of the hardest things for me when Alex was little and when we were sort of going on the diagnosis journey was communicating with him. I would buy so many toys, and I just wanted to have that interaction that comes so naturally normally, and he was really struggling. So you talk a lot about communication in your videos, and that there are so many ways to communicate, not just verbally. So can you talk us through some of those?
Yeah, I counted once. We use 11 different ways of communicating in my classroom. I'll try and think of them now, but it's crazy. We've got 10 children, and we use 11 ways of communicating. There are so many different ways of communicating. So yeah, first of all, it would be through eye contact or gesture. We're doing it all the time as humans. We use body language, that kind of, gesture. And your children will be doing it by reaching for something that they want, or cuddling behind you if they're scared. That's communication. So that's one. Next is speech, is one of the ways of communicating. Signing. So we use Makaton in my class. There, but other different sign languages. There are photos. So there's symbols as well. So if your children aren't ready for symbols yet, then photos is a really good option, because sometimes it's more obvious what the thing is. An illustrated picture. sound buttons. So I don't know if you've seen those, but you can record your voice or music on a sound button, and that could be used to help your children understand what's happening next, or for them to communicate yes, no, toilet, all those kind of things. There's objects of reference. So there's two different types of objects of reference. There could be, say, for example, with your school bag, when they see you pick up your school bag, the keys and their coat, they know they're going outside.
Yeah.
Objects of reference. There's also some kind of more abstract objects of reference. So maybe you just have some jingly keys for going outside, and it's not actually the keys that you actually use, but it refers to we're going outside. And if you use it enough, they will understand this means going outside, for example. What else is there? Oh, then AAC. So there's things like textbooks, communication folders, low tech and high tech AAC. So you might have seen the iPads.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to communicate, and lots of our children, even though they might be non-speaking, are using lots of those other ways all of the time. It's just we become so blind to it because speech seems so important. I've had a class of 14 to 16-year-olds, and one was learning to count 1, 2, 3, like still learning 1, 2, 3, and the other one was ready to take his like math GCSE in one class.
Yeah.
Huge range of needs. A mainstream teacher would never have that.
No.
In class, you just wouldn't have that. Or if you did, they would be outside of the classroom being educated by teaching assistants. They would never be in the class.
Yeah.
And same here. We this year I have some working at 3 months, kind of cognitively. So learning to track lights, up, down, left, right, learning to drop, those kind of things. Learn to anticipate when they're just about to be moved, those kind of things. And other children that are doing phonics and learning to write sentences. So all in one class. It's very individualized, very, very bespoke. You just become incredibly creative, which is one thing I love about the job. Often in this job as well, like, it's different. I wouldn't necessarily teach them a brand new skill knowingly. Usually it's just me facilitating the opportunity for them to show me what they already know. It's a really way of teaching. I don't know if you find that with your boys as well. Sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Or I didn't even know you could do that. It's not like, absolutely. Today we're going to learn this. Today we're going to learn you do this. It's like, oh, you just provide the opportunity of them to show you, oh, you already know how to do that. And that, if you get that a lot in special education, I certainly find that anyway.
And they change so quickly as well, in the same way that, neurotypical children change. Like, we've noticed a huge change in Max over the last literally 4 weeks.
Right.
Just things that he wasn't doing before that he's suddenly just doing. And
sometimes it's about them being more regulated. Sometimes it's not literally. It's just they're less anxious, so they're able to do those things. So our main focus is reduced anxiety and all the communication methods. Because with that, and as regulated as possible sensory-wise, because then they can show us what they know, or they're able to learn. Without those 3 things, they could know the whole, they could know quantum physics in their head, but they wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, that's really important, actually.
What are your tips? So I'm really interested about the anxiety thing, because I definitely see that quite a lot in Max. What are your kind of top tips, I guess, for reducing that anxiety, I guess, at home and in the classroom? Because I know that we don't have as much influence when they're at school, but I still think, and Amy and I are very keen to build the relationship as much as we possibly can with both the schools that the boys are going to and with the Senkos, etc. So I guess influencing any change that we can. What are your tips around reducing anxiety so that they're in that space to learn?
Yeah, anxiety is a really important one. I think that, I've worked with maybe 400 autistic people, and the only thing they all have in common is anxiety. So I think that's right. It's really important and really brilliant that you have cracked up on that first, because I think that is the most important thing to consider here is anxiety around autism. So first of all, why are they anxious? Because they're in a world that is so not built for them, not made for them. There is so much going on that they are having to navigate that no wonder they feel out of control. No wonder they feel anxious. Your question with how can a parent support the school is a really good one. I think communication is really important, and don't worry about being that parent. Like, if you need to send in, I love parents that send in the homeschool books and actually write in them. I love the emails, the photos, just tell us what kind of night they've had. Tell us if they've been at their grandma's this weekend and actually that was a bit different and out of routine. Like, please tell us that. Tell us that, you know, you're going on holiday or you're moving house and you're going to pack. You know, some parents don't tell us this stuff, and it's really hard to support them with that anxiety, because we might think it's something else and it's not. And actually we can talk them through that, or we can work with you making social stories or photo books about those kind of things. So don't keep us in the dark, I would say, is one thing. And vice versa as well. You know, if we're sending home an anxious child, I'm sure you would want to know why.
Yes.
And it might be something obvious. Maybe it was a really noisy day that day, or maybe there was a change in routine, whatever. And it would help you at home at bedtime to know those things were going on.
One thing that you were talking about, actually, that I guess is maybe not as widely known, and actually something that I've learned through this as well, is that actually children who are autistic often take longer to process information. How important is it just to wait a little bit of time after you give them information or give them direction, just to let it sink in and
really important.
process?
So children with learning disabilities more often, but all children and all adults really, but for children with learning disabilities especially. So imagine giving an instruction is like rolling a ball to them and expecting them to catch it. And typically it takes them 10 seconds to catch the ball. So that's 10 seconds of processing time from your instruction to receiving the instruction and understanding it. 10 seconds catching the ball. If you do this, which I see all the time, with good intention, is Alex, catch the ball. Alex, catch the ball. Catch it. Where are your hands? Show me your hands. Catch it. Catch it. That's 10 balls you have thrown to Alex.
Yep.
And he can't catch them all. He might catch the last one. He might catch the first one. He might catch a few words. Is he going to act on it? No, he will not. Yeah. He won't know what to do with that. So what we do is, Alex, wait till they're ready. You know, like you can feel it in your heart, can't you? Catch the ball and then don't say anything.
Yeah.
10 seconds. And they might catch it, they might not. And then you go again with exactly the same instruction. Alex, catch the ball. Yeah. So you can see how much clearer that is. It's quite alien at first, but it just becomes habit as you start. And the ball analogy it explains it perfectly, I think. They just can't receive that information necessarily all at once.
Just really overwhelming for them.
Yeah, because they're taking in not just the auditory, but like the typical, especially for autistic children, they're taking in all of their senses at the same volume all at once. So yeah, if they're having lots of auditory put on that as well, then it's going to be really difficult to process that. But same for learning disabilities, they might have an auditory weakness or a memory weakness, so they might only remember the last word. I don't know if either of your boys do this. I don't know them, but you might say, "Do you want purple or red?" Red.
Yes.
Do you red or purple?
Yes.
We get it.
Oh, we have this.
Yeah. So it's because they're retaining the last word and repeating back to you because they know you want an answer. So that's called it's echolalia. So it's not delayed echolalia. It's really common, really, really common.
Okay.
So if you're putting lots and lots of information on them, they're just going to remember the last word. So it doesn't actually matter how much times you've said it.
That's so interesting.
Mm.
So one of the things that we have with Max is when he gets very anxious and very stressed about something. So for an example is school settles. So he had a couple of school settles one week. We were doing a lot of talking to him about it, and potentially over such a duration that, as you were saying, he built up to be actually quite anxious about it. There was other things going on that week. He had a birthday. It was all just too much, and it all built up into this huge meltdown. And obviously in that moment, they're so deregulated that the processing of information, I'm guessing, is even less than, or slower. And the auditory, for him, anything auditory is, it elevates the meltdown even more. But he's also really seeking of it. Like, he wants us to talk and he wants us to be engaged with him. But anything we do is wrong. Anything we say is wrong.
So this is the brain. And then when they're dysregulated, they're in fight or flight mode. So nothing is actually connecting. I'll show you the video. I've not explained it very well yet. So like you basically like everything connecting, the auditory, the processing, the sensory, everything just goes whoa like that. So yeah, of course they're not going to be able to reason, understand the same way. So often you do have to like then focus on that, focus on their calming, focus on maybe offering them the objects, whereas normally they can perfectly reason with you and understand sentences. Maybe they can't right now, and you have to just show them the objects, calm down, get regulated again, and then try again a different way or the same way. So yeah, it's fight, flight, or fright response. Their body is completely filled with adrenaline, and they absolutely cannot reason. But then you see that in toddlers as well. You see that. You see that in after the Olympics. Like, some of their interviews are just like completely bizarre because their body is in complete fight, fright, or flight mode, and we can't really process that information properly or make reasonable judgments. Yeah, it's all for the same reason. But yeah, that happens with dysregulation for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've had to do that's felt really alien to us actually is just like almost not speak at all, because we were kind of in, because as a toddler it happened and it was kind of, okay, this is probably just typical toddler, and then it kind of, it carried on. And we were kind of trying to do the whole distraction thing, which I'm sure other parents can probably relate to, where you're trying to distract them out of what we thought was a tantrum. We were, exactly like, oh yeah, let's do this and let's do that. And actually it's exactly like you were saying with the ball analogy. We're just firing stuff at him to try and get him out of the mindset, I guess, that we felt like he was there.
Lots of teaching assistants, I see that a lot, and I think it's love. Like, you just want to fix it for them. I can't imagine what it's like for a parent, because as a teacher, it's the worst thing in the world seeing your child who you love so much, so full of pain and fear, and you just want to fix it. You don't want to not say anything. You don't want to not, especially if you know what they want. It's so hard not just do it. I don't know how you do it, actually, because I'm a teacher and I still really struggle to just not fix it for them. And sometimes you don't know how to fix it, and or it's impossible to fix because it's not actually possible what they're asking of you or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so hard. But absolutely, you are absolutely right. The best thing to do is just be there. Just be there. You don't need to say anything. Sometimes a few head squeezes or a hand squeeze just to know you're there is enough. Sometimes that's too much, and it's just about sitting the other side of the room and just being there and being ready when they're ready.
Yeah.
And that is enough, and that is fixing it. But yeah, no, I've totally been there and done all the wrong things and tried to distract, tried to cuddle. I've been there. It's really, it's almost our gut instinct to do all those things, isn't it? But
I think you're right. Yeah, it does feel like gut instinct because you just want to fix it, don't you? And yeah,
again, that becomes a muscle. The more you do it, the more it becomes habit. Actually,
yeah.
Now if you're dysregulated, if they're on the floor, the first thing I do is come down to their level and give squeezes if they're consenting of it, and not say anything. It's kind of habit now, but that's taken years of undoing a lot.
Yeah, that's going to be so reassuring to so many parents to know that just sitting there in silence, you are doing enough. That is enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
They often struggle that if a teacher walks over, it looks like they're not doing anything about it. And I think, that's their job, that they're paid to support this child, and they're just sitting there whilst the child is really upset. It looks so bad if you don't understand. I think maybe mainstream teachers, I'm attached to a mainstream school as well, some TAs will feel the pressure of that, of having to look like they're fixing it, having to look like they're doing something all the time. You have to be pretty confident and in the middle of if test goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, as a parent, kind of letting go of that judgment.
You have to be pretty confident to stand back and let your child exhaust themselves and be their true self, to let it all out and just wait with all the judgment, with all the tuts and looks and all that. That takes some confidence. And I totally don't blame anyone who doesn't want to go through. I get it. I've been there.
Yeah.
For teaching assistants as well, if you're a teacher listening to this, just know that your TA probably is doing the best thing. They are not being lazy. They are not just sitting back and being unsure. They are just giving them space, and that is perfectly okay.
Moving away from that slightly, Alex does attention autism, which you talk about a lot, and that's all part of his daily routine at nursery, and he will be doing that at school. He's benefited hugely from it, and you showcase this in your videos. But in your own words, why do you think it's so successful? And can you explain what it is to those who aren't sure of what it is?
Yeah, so attention autism is a speech and language intervention by Gina Davies, who's a speech and language therapist. And it is basically a way of bringing a group of children together using motivating activities. So it's making the children want to join the group rather than bringing them to the group and then trying to get them to sit down for a story, for example, which might not be that motivating for them. I bring really motivating sensory toys out of a bucket in a really red coat Butlins kind of way, like the most exciting plan you've ever seen. I mean, it's absolutely irresistible. So naturally, the children, even if they're not even interested in their peers, will kind of gather together and are interested in this bucket. And then naturally, they learn to be next to their peers. They learn to pay attention to the adult. They learn to take turns with each other. They learn to tolerate sharing a space or sharing a toy. But it's all done through just being the most exciting you can be with these toys or crafts or whatever it is. And it's such a wonderful, fun intervention to do, not only for the actual session, but it also, as the teacher, teaching my teaching assistants, it breeds a culture of let's make it fun. And then that stems into everything we do. I see my teaching assistants now making maths the same way. They'll bring out the cubes and make it really fun, or we're at playtime and they bring out the balls and do some kind of thing. It kind of breeds that culture of, if this is fun, they will want to join it. And it kind of spreads like wildfire through everything you do. So I kind of love the intervention for that, because if it's fun, then children learn. If it's boring, children don't want to learn, and then you get behaviours and you get all that kind of thing. So, that's kind of why I love attention autism, really.
I'd never heard of it before, so I've definitely learnt something. So I'm definitely going to bring that up actually with Max's school that he's going to, because I'm not sure whether they do that. But it kind of resonates with me actually, because one of the things that Amy and I did with our daughters was a baby sensory class, and actually so much of that is exactly the same thing, and you could see
they get so much out of it.
And children kind of just being absolutely fascinated with everything that's going on around them. And the wonderful teacher who did it was kind of, she was so enthusiastic. She'd have puppets behind her screen, facial expressions. And then somewhere along the line that gets lost, I think, sometimes with mainstream. And it all just becomes very serious. And actually all young children, I would imagine, love that element of fun and play.
Yeah, I've got one of my teaching assistants' children is 6, so she's year 1. And she sees my videos and says, I would love to do this in school, but they don't trust us. And I just wonder what she means by that. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she means they don't trust that we would still like it.
Yeah.
There's lots of, I do it in a really quite toddlery kind of way, just because that's where my class are at. But I have done it with 14-year-olds before, and you just do it you do a kind of rap, and you do it like a little bit differently. You bring out whoopee cushions and fart slime and all those kind of things. And pranks. There's ways of doing it for all sorts of different children. But it's just about, of course you want to join this. This is really fun.
Yeah.
You want to join this. And then in that, you're introducing new words and introducing new concepts. And it's just fabulous. I adore the program so much.
I guess the behaviour thing kind of really resonates with me, because we sometimes see that with Max, especially when he's kind of overwhelmed or anxious. So the behaviour definitely is his way of showing that he's feeling those things. And obviously that's just a form of communication, and we've kind of learnt this over the time that we've sort of known about Max and a potential diagnosis for him. What from your experience, like, why do children do these things, and what's the best way to tackle them? Because I mean, I'm still learning as a parent how to best deal with that. And looking back, I didn't deal with it in the best way. I know that.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I mean, girl, we can all relate to that. I will die on the hill shouting behavior is communication. So imagine you have no words, like they're gone this second. How would you communicate? You'd use your body, right? You would gesture, you would point, you would stamp, pull, reach. You would rely on your body. But imagine if that's not then understood again and again and again, and then put sensory needs on top of that. So you're feeling really overwhelmed because the light's really bright and there's noise and there's sounds, and you're still not being understood again and again. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, you're gonna do something.
You're gonna pour the drink over. You're gonna kick. You're gonna bite. You're gonna bite yourself. You're gonna run away. You are.
Yeah.
You just are.
I think because, again, like, Max has really learned that that's a way of getting someone to recognise that he's overwhelmed or he's, outsourced.
Don't we act fast?
Yeah.
When a drink goes flying across the room, you see 3 adults run. You sitting still, just like rocking like this. Where are those 3 adults?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you see them hitting their heads, my God, don't we act quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very clever. They learn how to kind of communicate that need in the best way.
Yeah, it's like water running down the mountain. They find the quickest method to get what they need. Yeah. And it's the quickest method to getting what they need or want at that time, which is a need because they feel like they need it, even if it's chocolate buttons. In their mind, they need it. If they hit their head, mum comes running, comforts me. I keep hitting my head. Fine, have the chocolate buttons.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's how they've learned.
Their way of learning to communicate.
But let's undo that then. Let's unpick that. Let's think about, okay, well, how do we not get them to be hitting their head? It's to react a little bit slower, to maybe to change the course of the water, to make it easier for them to communicate in a safe way and more effective for them to communicate in a safe way than an unsafe way. So that means having communication methods available and modeled to them at all times so that it's quicker for them to press a button to ask for chocolate buttons. The adult reacts in exactly the same way with exactly the same speed as if they're hitting their head and gives them chocolate buttons or whatever it is. I don't do with food, but that's a really bad example. But you know what I mean? Like their toy or their TV program. If we react in the same way as when they're being unsafe, they'll just press the button because they don't want to hurt themselves. Why would they hurt themselves? And they can just press a button and get the reaction. Or press the iPad or use a symbol or use a picture. But I think the problem is that adults aren't reacting the same way. They're not reacting with the same urgency.
Yeah. And some of that those behaviours even that come through that communication can be so emotive, I think, for you as a parent, or, some of the things, like for me, in my experience, biting, I'm not sure why it triggers me so much, but it really does. And that's probably when, Max started doing that from about 18 months and he didn't have speech at that point, no communication verbally at all. So it probably, exactly like you were saying, was the way that he learnt to get my attention and bond. And any
course, there's also another reason is he has sensory regulation.
Yeah,
because he's been diagnosed with autism, so I assume he has sensory regulation needs. So there's that on top of it as well. The biting feels grounding. It gives him a sense of self. It reminds him where he is in space. It helps with his proprioception. It helps with his oral seeking needs. There is so much that feels good about that. And an adult comes running and gives you what they want. It's an idea.
Yeah.
You need is to be offering better communication and safer communication, be modelling those, be reacting just as urgently with those, also meeting those sensory needs. Does he have a chewy? Are you giving deep pressure? Does he have a weighted blanket? Is he using a vibrating something? Is he, whatever it is, if that's for chewing? Or does he have crunchy snacks available to him?
Yes.
All of those kind of things. So it's like you're kind of meeting both things then, aren't you? You're meeting us in a safe way and showing him how to do that. And you're meeting his needs and wants in a safe way. I mean, but also sometimes you do have to say no.
Yeah.
Forget that. Like the 10th packet of crisps or even the 3rd packet of crisps. You have to say no. Their parent. It would also be really bad parenting if you just said yes all the time whenever they. It's perfectly okay to say no as a parent, knowing that you'll get dysregulation.
Yeah.
But you just have to then be ready with sensory needs and all that kind of thing. So I'm not saying it sounds so easy, but I'm like, oh yeah, just like offer them communication and it's all happy. Like I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th bag of crisps. I get it. Right, I get it. Believe me. But at the end of the day, you can't always get what you want. Is one of the things that my wonderful parent in my class says. You can't always get what you want. It's true.
It's true. Yeah. I think the thing that we struggle with it sometimes, or have found difficult, is that there's not really an obvious pattern to it. So it doesn't tend to be in response. So it's not something that he does if he doesn't get what he wants. It's always a reaction, i.e., if a fire alarm goes off and there's just utter chaos, that would be his, I guess, fight response. Is that's the only thing he knows in that moment that will, I guess, make him feel safe. Yeah, and get someone to help him, because he is verbal or he's speaking, but he doesn't always, I think, have the words available in that moment. Yeah. So it can be quite difficult to know when it's going to come, and we can go a long time and then it will happen. Yeah.
Lots of the children that I work with do a similar thing, because it's like it's help, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, I think that's literally what it is. Help me. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so common. Maybe if he had a tree around his neck, maybe he can't even like reach for that in that moment.
Yeah, we've tried.
Reach for that. So it's almost like about him being regulated as much as possible throughout the day, just in case something happens. So at least he's coming at it from a state of regulation, something heightened already, and then
exactly.
And you having a tree in hand and like stop it. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's easy, but as far as behavior goes, there's always a reason. They don't want to hurt themselves. They don't want to hurt you. If they could find an easier, safer method to do it that had the same results, they'd do it.
Yeah.
And I see that time and time again. It's just about us offering a safer alternative that is as quick and as effective.
One thing you've talked about in your videos that resonates with me in particular is that Alex likes to watch clips over and over again. And I said last week, it is quite triggering for you as a parent when you've had the same thing over and over. But because you explained it in your videos, why that could be, and that he could potentially be a Gestalt language processor, which you'll just explain in a minute. But how do you know if that is what they are, or they just enjoy watching that same section for a sensory reason, or they find it funny? Or
it can be stimming because it's quite pleasing to them. It could be they're trying to process some kind of big emotion or big event that's happening in the program. So that definitely could be a thing. I would say to know that they are a Gestalt language processor. Gestalt just means whole. So it's basically they process language in whole phrases. It's basically the opposite of how neurotypical children learn. So typically, children would learn ma da ba ga ha, and then that would become mum, dad, no, go, wouldn't it? Like the little phrases. Yes. They would gradually build up. They would say red cup, mum's cup, and they wouldn't they? And then it kind of builds up from there. Gestalt language processors flip it completely on their head. They will learn red bus goes round and round first. And then they would break that up into phrases. So it would be red bus goes round, round. They might think red drink goes round and round when they want a drink. Yeah. And then it might be blue drink. And then they've taken round and round, and that's completely off now. So now they just ask for blue drink. But it's come from the phrase of red bus goes round and round. And that's how they've learned language. And then from that point, it then goes up, follows the more neurotypical path. That's the Gestalt language processor. So if you're seeing those kind of phrase usage, for example, one of them said, oh yeah, if you want, do you want red or purple? Purple or red? Red. If they're saying that, that's the start of echolalia. Or if they are repeating directly things from programs they're seeing, maybe they're humming a certain tune, even if they're not using any words. If they're humming certain tunes recognizably, I can recognize that tune. or they're clapping a certain rhythm. It could be completely non-speaking, but they're clapping a certain rhythm. You're like, I recognize that. That's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or something. That's them processing those phrases. That's kind of or they're maybe playing with their toys in a way that you're like, they're completely reenacting something they've watched. It's not if they're completely reenacting it. They're the kind of initial stages of Gestalt language processing, because they're taking these phrases and kind of trying to process them. And then maybe from that will come whole phrase speaking, and then they'll break it up from there. It's not guaranteed, but that's usually typically the way of working. And it's really common with autism that is typical for autistics to learn to speak in that kind of way. It's why some autistics will have an American accent when they speak, for example. Really, I love this topic.
Yeah, so interestingly, I think he was about 18 months. So he went from saying nothing at all. So some people say, oh, they said, quite a few words and then stopped. Alex didn't. Yeah. Alex didn't say anything. And then his main one, he says all the time, is I did it. So he'll put his shoes on and go, I did it. And then we're like, well done, mate. That was brilliant. But everything's I did it. But he knows what it means.
Yes.
So it's I did it. And then it's mum, dad, up. And then sometimes randomly on the swing last week, he said higher. So what we're finding at the moment is it's a lot.
Well, actually, isn't it? It might be played as far as age goes, but actually for developmentally, because he's saying those single words, I would say that's typical, even though he is 4.
Yeah.
I would say actually his way of using language sounds quite typical to me. Dad, up, higher, did it, or sometimes it's oops, or where's it gone, or there it is. It's often like those kind of phrases. Bye-bye. It's often what you see in, I don't know how old your daughter is.
She's 15 months and she's saying more words than him, but I think she's definitely helping him.
Maybe a typical kind of order though would be a similar thing. It's just something to watch out for. It doesn't mean he's not. He might be processing those phrases in his head and then splitting them up, but that sounds more typical to me.
And you have seen that in autistic children as well, that some just will talk typically. It won't be that.
Definitely.
Yeah, Max didn't process language like that. When the words came, they were sort of single words, and
that's interesting. I didn't know that, actually. That's news to me.
All Gestalt means is whole, so it's whole phrases. But if they're using split up words already, then either he's already at stage 4 in segmenting his phrases. Obviously, I don't know his journey, or he is just learning. Typically, it's just delayed.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Can we talk about stimming? Because this is something that, gets brought up a lot. And there's obviously so many different types of stimming. Some of them might not even be obvious that they are stimming. What are the main ones that you see? Why is it so important not to stop stimming and that behaviour?
There aren't main ones. There's main ones for each child.
Okay.
And it can be different for each child. For example, I'll say what I'm doing right now. I'm playing with my ring because it's helping me concentrate, and it's helping me. It's like a subconscious thing that I'm doing.
I do the same thing.
I also like just play with my hair. I notice I do it sometimes, or sometimes I touch my face when I'm driving. And it's what we're doing is we're self-confirming. We're giving ourselves a sense of self. We're grounding ourselves. We're knowing where we are, and it's helping us think. It's like fidget tools, right? And this comes from every baby when they're born doesn't have a sense of self. They could be an inanimate object. They don't know that they have a sense of being yet. And they learn this by other adults around them confirming their sense of self, right? So, for example, when your children sneeze, what do you say? Bless you. When they cough, oh, that's a big cough. Or when they yawn, oh, that's such a big yawn. Or when they blink, oh, hi, whatever. Yeah, that's self-confirming their behaviours. You do it verbally, you do it physically by hugging them. Yeah, that's how babies learn a sense of self. Now, maybe a disabled baby won't be processing those things as well. Talk about processing time like we did before. Autistic babies, you'll be doing all the sneezing. Oh, big yawn. But they're also taking in the whole world. They don't know it. They don't know what you're doing is for them. So maybe they're not getting that sense of self they're not getting that confirmation of their sense of self, just like a neurotypical baby would. So they find their own ways of giving them a sense of self. So say, for example, if they are yawning and you're saying, oh, big yawn, they're not receiving that. But what they are receiving is the lovely stretch of their muscles as they do it. And they're feeling it all in their mouth. So actually, they are getting far more from their own body as their confirmation of self than they are from the outside world. Another one, maybe they burp and it gurgles up in their tummy, and then it comes out of their throat and it gives them a smell and a sound of their burp. And you say, oh, big burp, but they haven't received that. They just feel the bubbles and the burp and all those kind of things. So again, they're confirming this itself. Now this happens really early on, months old, 3 to 6 months old. They'll be doing this. But what happens from then, and often I think that's why it looks like they become autistic at 18 months because their body is doing them. But then from 18 months, they start tiptoe walking or flapping or shaking or rocking. And it's just they're confirming their sense of self and their sense of being, because all they've had up until that point is them confirming themselves, their own identity, their own being. They've received other bits from other people, but not as much. It's definitely less than a neurotypical child because of the nature of who they are. So then bring it on to how they look at 4 or 8 or 6. They're still confirming those behaviours. They might be teeth grinding or biting their hand, or rocking or tiptoe walking, or twiddling their hair, or colouring in, or covering themselves in mud, or all of those kind of things. And then obviously the sensory needs come into that as well, and sensory seeking behaviours. But that's typically what stimming is. It's self-confirming behaviour is actually what I like to call it, because they are just confirming their sense of self in that moment. And you might see that stimming becomes more heightened when they're anxious or dysregulated, because they need that self-confirmation more in that moment, that grounding more in that moment than they would if they were regulated or felt quite at ease. So yeah, that's stimming in a nutshell. But it does look different for every children. Like I say, I have worked with over 400 children. They have overlaps, obviously, but not one stims exactly the same way as another. I have some that make sounds, certain like high-pitched sounds or gurgly sounds. I have some that colour in. I have some that line up. I have some that twiddle. I have some that bite or hit their thighs, or run up and down, twirl, tiptoe walk. I mean, even just like scrunching their nose, it's all stimming. Girls typically will hide or mask their stimming behaviours. Not even consciously always. It's just sometimes they're just more socially acceptable ways of stimming than others. So some girls might twiddle with their hair or colour in. That's a stimming behaviour. It's repetitive. Anything that's repetitive, and feels good. So that colouring, that's a very stimmy kind of movement, isn't it? But they're just colouring in, right? So sometimes girls can just mask it a little bit better, and it doesn't become as obvious until their peers kind of stop doing those things.
When do you see that curve typically happens, or is it really just
really different for other children? We get a lot of girls come to us in year 7. I think for lots of different reasons. I think hormones have a part to play in it. I think year 6 girls are really kind and really lovely, and even if they aren't playing with them from a peer-to-peer, we're doing the same thing sense, they're just really kind with the children, and they're not left out, and they're really included. I think year 7 can be really scary for parents and children. So typically in my special needs school that I worked in before, we would get a lot of girls in year 7, those kind of reasons. But it doesn't mean that they haven't always been autistic, obviously. It just means that maybe it was a safer environment to be at school in, and maybe secondary school wouldn't be. Not necessarily that it's year 7 that everything happens. I think it has something to do with the culture in primary and secondary school.